Welcome, welcome. Welcome to this first webinar that we are organizing around RSM's new online master in sustainability management. My name is Emilio Marti. I'm an associate professor at RSM and a teacher in RSM's new online master. In this webinar series, RSM faculty members will discuss sustainability issues with leading practitioners. We are recording this on campus in the studio of Erasmus University. This is also where we recorded many of the knowledge clips for the new online master. It's good to be back in the studio. Well, I feel a little bit like a moderator for a late night show, like a little bit like Jon Stewart in The Daily Show. I love this show. I have my little cards, I even have one of these earplugs. And the only problem here is that our participants, hello there, are not live in the studio. So they can't cheer and we don't have this late night show feeling. So actually, Madeleine, I'm sure you have some canned cheering you can play, right? Amazing. Okay. So let's start this once again, and this time with some cheering, like in a late night show. So welcome, welcome. We have a packed show tonight. We have Mark van Baal with us, the CEO and founder of Follow This. We will talk about how shareholders can pressure companies to become more sustainable, and we discuss whether the current ESG backlash requires fundamental changes in ESG shareholder engagement. If you have questions for Mark, please put them into the chat and we'll get to them soon. So welcome, Mark. It's a great pleasure to have you in our webinar. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. So thanks for having me, Emilio. And it has always been my dream to be in the Tonight Show. So thank you for this introduction. I also love Jon Stewart.
Wonderful, wonderful. So just to start with the basics so that we are on the same page, can you tell us who is Follow This and what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, Follow This is a group of long-term activist shareholders. And I say long-term because that really differentiates us from the short-term activists, which you see a lot active in the oil and gas industry these days. I founded Follow This in 2015 with the conviction that if we want to stop climate change, we need to change big oil. Big oil is responsible for the vast majorities of all emissions. So if big oil doesn't change, if big oil doesn't lower emissions, there's no chance we will stop climate change. There's no chance we will achieve the Paris Climate Agreement. So 15 years ago, as a journalist, I wrote down, I'm an engineer who turned journalist after seeing An Inconvenient Truth of Al Gore. I wrote down many times, wouldn't it be great if companies like Shell, BP, Exxon would put their brains and billions behind the energy transition to clean energy. They have the brains, the billions, the global reach, the political power, the engineering prowess to speed up the energy transition. Would be good for these companies, but would also be good for the world.
Yeah.
Only they didn't listen to me as a journalist. So I thought, okay, who do they listen to? They only listen to their shareholders. And so I thought the shareholders need to support them to make this bold and brave decision to stop exploring for more oil and gas, continue selling oil and gas for the next 10, 20 years, but investing all the profits in clean energy. Yeah. And that's a decision for shareholders. And shareholders have only one power, and that's once a year at the annual general meeting, the shareholders meeting, they can vote. They can vote for remuneration, they can vote for strategy, they can vote for board members, but they can also put their wishes on the ballot, on the agenda of the annual general meeting. Only that was a power which the large institutional investors did not use. So first, as a journalist, I tried to encourage them to put climate on the agenda, but they said, no, we're not doing that. We do engagement. We talk with them behind the scenes. That's escalation. It's shareholder democracy is the only democracy in the free world where voting is considered escalation, and even putting something on the agendas is called escalation. So I thought, okay, somebody has to put it on the agenda, and that's why I founded Follow This. So since 2016, we put on the agenda of the annual general meeting of big oil companies, first with Shell, we had to start close to home, of course, later BP, Equinor, and the US oil companies, set targets that are aligned with the Paris Climate Agreement, with the idea that if you set targets to reduce emissions, you can only conclude that you have to invest in clean energy.
Yeah.
So that's what we do since 2016, and that's our theory of change. So if the shareholders support them, compel them, they will make the change. And if one or two of these big oil companies commits to the energy transition, shareholders will reward it, society will reward it, customers will reward it, and they will show the rest of the world that it's possible, and the others will follow, and we will be just in time to stop climate change.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So Follow This, I've seen, has over 10,000 members, and among these 10,000 members, they all provided some funding, and with that you have now enough equity to actually submit shareholder proposals for all the major oil and gas companies. Yeah. Now, just to get a better understanding of your day-to-day activities at Follow This, who is your main target audience? Are you mainly talking or preparing interactions with oil and gas companies, or with other shareholders, or with the broader public and the media? So, or put differently, who is supposed to follow you primarily? Are you talking primarily to the shareholders, to the companies, or to the broader public?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the easy answer is all three of them. I think the broader public needs to be aware that the global economy is at risk because of climate change, that their pensions are at risk for climate change, and that their pension funds, the large institutional investors, have the power to change that. They have the key to solving the climate crisis. They are the owners of the large emitters, and they have to use their votes. So that's how we address the general public, that they understand that the problem and the solution is with institutional investors, with BlackRock, with their pension funds, etc. Then we talk to the oil majors, still with the hope that they will see what everybody else sees and that it's time to transition. These are the most tireful conversations. So we talk with investor relations, with CEOs once in a while, and I always go in there with the hope that I can convince them that it's the right decision for the company to change course. I sometimes say, if you don't change, you will be the Kodak of the 21st century. Maybe for students, that's not a very known example, but for all the people like me, Kodak is the best example of a company that did ignore a disruptive innovation, digital photography. They invented it themselves. They didn't want to go to the market, and they went bankrupt. So that's what I sometimes tell them how great it is to invest in clean energy, that getting oil out of the ground gets more expensive. Renewables are technology, getting more and more cheap when they're used in big scale. It's exponential growth, etc. But that are always very tiresome conversation, because that's my agenda. I want to inspire them. Their agenda, oil major agenda, is to tell me, please stop filing resolutions. We will say that you have had your successes, but now please leave us alone. So these are tiresome conversations. And then we have the conversation with the institutional investors. Yeah, that's sometimes inspiring, sometimes also tireful, because some institutional investors are very enthusiastic about what we're doing. They vote for our resolution. They say, you do something we cannot do. And it's great that you put it on the agenda. We will vote for it. But others rather stay in their comfort zone of having this behind closed door conversations, and don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation with the oil majors that they need to change. So these three audiences we talk to, but the end of the day, the key is with the investors.
But I guess from what you've just told us, most of your discussions are actually with investors, right? Not with oil and gas companies. So maybe you have like 1 or 2 meetings with them per year, but that's it. And I guess like there's so many more investors, and so you try to convince them to actually follow you, right? In their voting. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, exactly. Because again, they hold the key to solving the climate crisis, and they have a huge financial incentive to do so. Because if the climate crisis gets out of hand, if we end up in a world above 2 degrees, this will be devastating for the global economy. Floods, wildfires, extreme weather, high costs of extreme weather events like what you see with the hurricanes in the US, what you see with the floodings in Southern Europe, always a bill of billions. This hurts the economy and therefore hurts the institutional investors who are what they sometimes say, universal owners, stewards of the global economy. Their portfolio is in the entire global economy. And if the global economy gets hit, they will be hit. And the pensions of their clients will be hit. So that's what we try to convince them, that acting on climate is, of course, a moral obligation, but it's also a financial obligation for them. And that's the only way we're going to win this, that we convince institutional investors that it's a financial imperative to act.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask whether it's a coincidence that Follow This emerged in the Netherlands, or is it something about the Dutch ecosystem that made you particularly successful in the Netherlands?
Yeah, what helped a lot. So yeah, it's a coincidence that Follow This started in the Netherlands because I live in the Netherlands. But we could be successful because at least the Dutch pension funds and institutional investors are very transparent about their voting. Yeah. And that's thanks to another organization which was founded 20 years ago. The VBDO, the Association of Sustainable Investors, Dutch Association of Sustainable Investors, they created transparency. So because their activities, all pension funds publish their votes. So that's what was for us a great tool to use, because that's public information. So we could publish voting tables where we showed which Dutch investors voted for Paris alignment, which we asked the oil majors, and which Dutch investors voted against Paris alignment. So what we did, we praised the ones who supported it, that they took the right decision. We didn't talk about the ones who didn't support us, but we published the public information in simple tables where we showed green tick boxes and red crosses to show who supported Paris and who voted against Paris. And that's one of the ways we convinced, by being public, the Dutch investors to join. But also because there are just the right individuals who make this decision. So I can always say we're supported by, say, PGGM or MN or with tens of billions, but I better say Hans Willemijn and a handful of others. I know them all personally. Within all this institutional investors, there are one or two climate advocates who think, okay, I'm in a financial institution, I can make a difference now. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And I convince my colleagues with financial arguments.
Yeah. But I think there's probably also like a certain structural dimension to this. Like I come from Switzerland originally, and in Switzerland you have a completely different pension fund sector. You have many more pension funds. They're super small, and it's usually like 3 people working in a pension fund, like one of them like managing the contacts with the asset manager, one of them managing the payout systems, and one of them running the secretary. So it's literally 3 people running that. And they're completely beholden to the asset managers and to the consulting firms because they have so little expertise when it comes to investing in general and sustainable investing in particular. And so I really think I'm actually quite impressed now that I'm in the Netherlands by just how sophisticated the Dutch pension funds are. And obviously this is partly because they have certain individuals, but I think it's also partly because they have a certain size and they just have built a certain expertise, and they also systematically explore the preferences of their beneficiaries. So they do surveys with their beneficiaries, and I think this gives them a strong client backing. And so do you think this is also part of the story, just the unique front-runner position of Dutch pension funds? Does that play into the success of Follow This?
I think so, Emilio. I think that's a part of the the reason we could get the support of the Dutch investors. At the end of after 10 years, we have all Dutch pension funds and large institutional investors voting in favor of our resolutions. It's a fair ask. We just ask them to ask all majors to commit to the Paris Climate Agreement, but still that's a big decision for a pension fund and for an institutional investor. So yeah, there's more expertise. On the other hand, you don't need much expertise. You just need to know that how devastating climate change will be, that we have to halve emissions in the next 10 years. And then leave it up to the boards of these companies to make a strategy. As an investor, you don't want, and as a shareholder, you don't want to sit in the board seat, but you can just tell them, okay, there's this global agreement, Paris Climate Agreement. In order to achieve that, we have to halve emissions, almost halve emissions by 2030, and you are the highest emitter, so you have to also almost halve your emissions. Yeah. So having too much expertise is also a risk, because you always lose from the oil majors, because if you have 10 experts, the oil industry will make sure they have 20. So it's you can better keep it on a high level. Yeah. On Switzerland, I want to make one remark. The Swiss pension funds are quite well organized in ethos, and they are also a supporter of the Follow This resolutions, a co-filer of the Follow This resolutions, and they gather together the Swiss pension funds behind our resolution, and that happened in the 2024 resolution, ethos, and I think around 8 Swiss pension funds were co-filers of our climate resolution. So the awareness in Switzerland is very high. Yeah, yeah. Maybe but still, I mean, you see the glaciers melting. I don't know, but.
Well, I mean, yeah, with skiing is actually a big issue, that you just like see that you can't ski in my childhood. There were some skiing areas that were like safe skiing places because there was always snow, and now the snow isn't there. So it's very tangible. And obviously, I mean, the ethos does amazing work, but it's also like they're representing 200 of pension funds, and it's of over 1,000 pension funds. So there's still like lots of Swiss pension funds that are just not very active in that area. So no. Actually, you just said like all the Dutch pension funds are now on board, but actually some of them have also divested from oil and gas companies. So I would like to hear your thoughts on divestments, because in a way divestments also makes it harder for you to get higher support with your resolutions, because some of the shareholders that would normally support you are not invested anymore, and so they can't support you. So what are your thoughts on divestments?
Yeah, in short, I think divesting the high emitters is very irresponsible, because when you're a responsible shareholder, if you sell your shares, somebody else, most probably less responsible, will buy the shares, and the pressure on the boards will decrease. That's what we saw happening in the last years. Yeah. That because of divestments, the pressure on oil and gas companies lowered, and it's quite a strange signal to say, yeah, you have to change, and if you don't change, I sell my shares. Then the oil industry thinks, okay, that's a good riddance. So I think the oil industry, every time a big critical pension fund divests, they celebrate, because what will happen if all the responsible shareholders divest? We will end up with irresponsible shareholders who think, who don't care about the Paris Climate Agreement, who don't care about climate change, just think that oil companies should make as much profits as possible. I still think that's also that will also not work out. The oil industry will also be hit by peak oil by 2029, and then they will also suffer from the energy transition, disruptive innovation, stranded assets, carbon taxes, liabilities for climate damage. So. But there will be still people who think, okay, let big oil become the next big tobacco. That's what I always tell the pension funds who want to divest. I basically say, okay, you've divested. There's no reason. There's no pension fund in their right mind who still owns tobacco shares. But tobacco still exists, and they're more evil than ever with their flame, with their vapes. selling vapes with strawberry flavor to 12-year-olds. So if more responsible investors divest, big oil will become the next big tobacco. They will continue to exist. They will continue to devastate the climate without any responsible shareholders. So I think it's irresponsible. Okay. And I really think that this is also the agenda of the oil industry. What you've seen happening with us with ExxonMobil, that was a signal from ExxonMobil. Okay, if you're too critical shareholders, we're going to sue you. So that's what the
well, can you actually put in context just for the participants what happened last year with ExxonMobil? Yeah. So they sued you, but can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah. To put it first, I have to explain what we achieved with our climate resolutions. So by filing our climate resolutions and getting support from investors, we managed to get 5 oil majors to set Scope 3 targets. That's jargon, but I suppose most students will know that. Scope 1 and 2 is the emissions of yourself, basically yourself and your suppliers. Scope 3 is the emissions of your customers. That's, of course, the elephant in the room in the oil industry. And when we started filing resolutions, we always asked for emission reductions for all emissions. So Scope 1, 2, and 3, including product emissions, customer emissions. Shell, BP, Equinor, all said that's unreasonable because we're not responsible for what our customers do with our products. When the votes for a resolution increased, they all set a Scope 3 target. They all set a Scope 3 target for 2050 because they thought then we're off the hook. If we promise something in the distant future, which we don't have to act on right now, we're off the hook. They were not off the hook because then we started saying, okay, nice, you have taken responsibility. Now it's time to talk about where are your emissions in 2030. They didn't want to talk about it, but then they had crossed the Rubicon and accepted accountability for Scope 3. So 5 oil majors have done that. And out of the super majors, 4 out of 5 have done that. So that's Shell, BP, Total Energies, and Chevron. They have all Scope 3 targets, and they're all under pressure to do really something about Scope 3 targets. So that's what we achieved with our resolution. Then we filed at BP, are a bit preoccupied because today BP will make an announcement as we speak. But I want to say ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is the only one without Scope 3 targets. And they had seen how effective our resolutions were with Shell and the others. So they thought, we don't want shareholders to vote on this. We're going to sue them. And they sued us in Texas with the objective to get a precedent so that no shareholder could ever file resolutions on Scope 3 or on climate or emissions in the future. So what we did is we withdraw our resolution to make the case mute, as they call it in the US. So the case was dismissed. This means that other shareholders can still file this kind of resolutions. Otherwise, we would have ended up in a very long and very costly legal procedures up to and including the Supreme Court, with the risk of losing and giving Exxon what they wanted, a precedent. So this did happen. But it proves how effective our resolutions are, that Exxon takes the effort to sue a small NGO in the Netherlands.
But it's, talking to industry participants, I've heard actually many refer to this specific case and also like mentioning that this has a certain chilling effect, right? Because like they have such huge teams, huge lawyer teams. If they sue you, that's obviously, that can be very costly. And just the uncertainty for you is just massive. So, Well, let's actually talk about the recent, what happened basically since 2022, because from 1915 or 16, when you submitted your first proposals, until 22, like the trajectory was just all upwards, right? So you reached, like, you started with a support of about 3%, and then you reached over 20% of support for your resolutions. So it seems like there's just one way things are going. And then in 2022, it was the war in Ukraine that made oil, just increased the oil price, made it much more profitable to produce oil. And also, like, there's the ESG backlash in the US that has taken up speed. So how has your experience been since then, particularly talking with shareholders? Do you think many shareholders have changed their minds about the climate change? Or is this just something that is mainly happening in the media and the discourse, and then many of the shareholders, they still have relatively similar views, they may just be less vocal about these things?
I think they're less vocal. I think I don't think investors have changed their minds. I think that they all can do the math and know that how devastating climate change is for their portfolio, for the billions they're trusted with. So they all see their fiduciary duty to act on climate. Only they don't dare anymore because in the US you can get sued. You can get sued by states, by Republican states. And you can be blamed of being too woke, too much ESG. There's a chilling effect there. But meanwhile, the urgency gets bigger. So that's the situation right now. I've coined this new phase, the Empire Strikes Back. So we have also been successful because the industry completely underestimated us and thought, okay, a small NGO from the Netherlands, they cannot have so much influence. But then in 2021, we got 30% at Shell, we got majorities in the US, and then they were completely awake and started to fighting back with a lot of misinformation about us, saying, Follow This wants to split up the company, Follow This wants us to end oil and gas tomorrow. All not true. We want them to transition, take the time. And also a lawsuit like ExxonMobil. So it's the boards of the oil industry who don't want to change and are fighting back now to continue business as usual for as long as possible, and they use politics for that. So let's face it, we're dealing with the biggest PR machine in the world. They have also successfully discredited science. We know about climate change since, and I always like to say that, 1896. So not 1996, no, 1896. The first article about climate change caused by CO2 was published by a Danish scientist, Svante Arrhenius. So we know it for 100 years. So they will do everything which gets in their way to keep their business model. And first science was the victim, now politics.
Well, let's turn to some questions from the audience. So this is someone asking in the chat, what are your thoughts on the recent SEC changes from last week, actually, that reduce the scope of permissible shareholder resolutions at company meetings in the US, reversing previous guidance issued in 2021? Additionally, how does you generally view and interpret the anti-ESG movement and their attempts to discredit the proxy voting process? So, I mean, this is a huge thing, right, in the shareholder engagement space, this SEC ruling from last week. I also wanted to speak about that, but in the audience, they also is also at the top of their mind. So what are you thinking about this?
Donald Trump made it very clear before he was elected that he would fire Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, on his first day in office, and he did, and he replaced it by more friendly, industry-friendly director. Same thing happened in his first term. In the first term, we couldn't file resolutions because the SEC agreed with the companies that company-wide emission reductions were micromanagement. Then during the Biden years, there was new leadership who interpreted the rules decently and said, of course, company-wide emission reductions are not micromanagement, so it should be on the ballot. So so we saw that coming. We knew that if Trump would be elected, it would be impossible to file resolutions in the US for the next 4 years.
Oh, really? So, because as I understand the regulation, you would also need to file 13D filing, right? Obviously, you have far less than 5%, but you're associated with other shareholders so that you have 5% of all votes, probably. So you would also require to do the 13D filings, which are a major hassle, right? So you're basically not submitting proposals in the US until this is changed.
No, we have to. We are still discussing our strategy, so we don't know exactly what we will do. But at the moment, filing the threshold in the US is quite low. So every country has a different threshold.
Sure.
In the UK, for example, you need 5% or 100 shareholders with a total of 5 million. That's what we have. We have 100 shareholders with 5 million. In Norway, you need just 1 share. In France, you need 0.5%. In the US, you need $2,000. But the company can go to the SEC with a no action letter and saying this should not be on the ballot because it's too vague, already implemented, too micromanagerial. And then the SEC takes a decision on that. And that's has turned out a very political decision.
Yeah. So one more question from the audience is, do or can you move your strategy also toward the do or can you move your strategy also toward the assets owned by investment funds that are labeled as green? So I assume basically you have like a big asset managers that have different funds, and one of these funds is green. So how do you actually interact with these big asset managers that offer all types of products, and some of them are actually green? How do you interact with these?
Yeah, if they're green and for that reason do not invest in oil and gas, then there's no votes to be cast. It would be great if there would be next to the green funds, there would be transition funds who just buy shares in incumbents to change them, and it could be in the oil and gas industry, but it could be in every industry. So it would be great if the financial system realizes that they are the stewards of the global economy and that they can, basically now politics is failing. Our last hope in the fight against the climate crisis. It's big oil can make or break the Paris Agreement, and that's a decision for the shareholders.
Yeah. Now, I have one last question from the participants. The question is, how could such companies in turn influence shareholders to remain on the road to transition, even though the profitability is taking a hit? And I think what is meant here is like, how can oil and gas companies make sure that their shareholders remain on board, even if their profitability goes down a bit as they transition toward a cleaner business model? So how loyal are shareholders? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that the investments an oil and gas company makes today will be sunken capital for the next maybe 10, 15 years, if it's a long-term project. So the investments oil and gas companies make are for the long term. So if they decide today to invest 1 billion in a new gas field offshore Guyana, or if they decide to invest it in wind turbines on the North Sea, this 1 billion will not influence their profits in the next quarters. So they have to think more long term and realize that investments in oil and gas from now on are at huge risk. Stranded assets, payment for the cost of climate damage, that's something which will be there are now court cases. It would be very logical if high emitters would pay for climate. Somebody has to pick up the bill for climate disasters. And would be most logical that the ones who are responsible for it will do that. So the only reason an oil and gas company can make such handsome profits is because they don't pay for the externalities, and this will be soon up. So if you realize that this handsome business model is soon over, because of all these reasons, all these risks, then you invest in the business models of the future. And my vision on transition is that the technology is not the problem; it's the business model which have to be reinvented. Like from to digital photography, the technology was there, but Kodak did not know the business models. So you have to explore for new business models instead of for new oil and gas. That's what you have to do if you want to survive as a company in an area of disruptive innovation. So that's indeed maybe today with the high oil prices, it's more oil and gas is more profitable than renewables, but this will not take long. In 2029, according to the IEA, oil and gas demand will peak, and it will go after that. It will go in the worst case scenario. That's a 2.4 degree scenario. It will go down, And the old majors, I still think it's going to grow. So yeah, if you have that realization that you invest for the long term, then investing in clean energy is a no-brainer.
Okay. Well, given time constraints, we have to end it here. Mark, thank you so much for taking time for our webinar. It was really a pleasure discussing the last 10 years of Follow This with you, and also your plans for moving forward with your shareholder engagement. So yeah, good luck for your activities.
Thank you so much, Emilio, and thanks for hosting this. And yeah, you could be John Stewart's replacement.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll train a little bit more. Mark, thank you so much.
Speak to you soon. Thank you all for your attention.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, so now we have about 10 minutes left to talk about the new online master in sustainability management. Now, we're very excited to be launching this 100% online master that learners around the world can join. It's a part-time master for professionals that will be working part-time, and then along their work, they can join this master and become professionals in sustainability management. The master is a 2-year master. It has 6 courses and a thesis, and you will both study the theoretical foundations of sustainability management, but then also we have many sessions in which you apply these ideas to real-world problems and obstacles. I can maybe briefly, before we move to the questions from you, let me just briefly tell you about my course that I will be teaching, and then I will be very happy to answer your questions. So I will be teaching a course on corporate governance for sustainability. And this is an 8-week course. In weeks 4, there's a study week, and the last week is a examination week. So it's 6 weeks of actual course. And in these 6 weeks, you will learn how corporate governance shapes sustainability. So corporate governance refers to the mechanisms, the internal and external mechanisms that determine how a company is run and how a company is steered. And so we will look both at internal corporate governance mechanisms, which include the board of directors, the top management team, and shareholders, which are considered internal governance mechanisms, and external governance mechanisms, which include like rating agencies or the whole informational environment that influences companies through ESG ratings, or analysts that monitor companies. We will also discuss about the media. Then we discuss NGOs and the whole normative environment, how NGOs try to influence companies. And finally, we'll talk about regulation, because also Mark mentioned several times that regulation matters a lot. For example, if the oil companies get sued to actually repay for the damages they are responsible for. So, and for us, what we're really excited about in this online master is that we'll have a relatively small cohort. So we plan to admit about 30 students, maybe a max of 35 students. And in each of the 6 weeks in my course and also in the other courses, there will be a live session. So in each of the weeks, there will be a live session of 90 minutes, and we'll offer it at 2 different times to accommodate different time zones. And in these 90 minutes, we'll delve into depth into some of the readings you've done. We will discuss case studies. We'll apply what you have read to real cases. And so for us, it's really important that in this online master, you get a lot of interactions with our faculty members. So we have 30 students. Let's say we offer the live session twice. So there will be like 12 people in the room and discussing with me these challenging issues around corporate sustainability. We still offer flexibility in the sense that it will be recorded. So if you can't make it one week, you can watch the recording. But you need to watch the recording, because there will also be an oral examination where I will then maybe ask you like, hey, back in that session, this is what we discussed. What are your thoughts on this? So our hope is really, or what we plan to do, it is really like very interactive master, while still allowing flexibility. If in 1 week or a few weeks you can't attend that, you can watch the recording. But in general, it's a lot about interactions, because we think these interactions are absolutely critical to facilitate learning and for you to become a sustainability professional. Now, that being said, let me move to the questions. One of you is asking, does RSM consider applicants with significant professional experience, so 10 plus years, in lieu of a bachelor's degree for its online master program in sustainability? That's a good question. I think, unfortunately, the answer is no, because you need a bachelor's degree, but maybe you could just write us and then we can check this. Yeah, please write us. I'm not fully sure. I think you need a bachelor to do the master. I mean, this is how it's usually done. But obviously, if you have significant professional experience, this is something the admissions team would need to decide. Another question is, if I follow the masters, how many hours a week are needed for studying? Okay, this is an excellent question. So we calculate that during the semester, you would need to spend between 15 and 20 hours per week to do the course. So in these 8 weeks for my course, for example, I expect you to work 15 to 20 hours. And in these 15 to 20 hours, you would spend like an hour or two watching the knowledge clips we have produced. Then you spend another 8 hours or so reading 2 papers and a case study. You will spend 90 minutes for the live session where we discuss all of that together. And then there will be some exercises you need to do in some weeks where you apply this to your company or to your country, where you upload a video and then you get peer feedback. You will also every week spend about 2 hours providing feedback to your peers for their assignments. And so all of that adds up to about 15 to 20 hours. And well, I realize that's a lot, so it's ambitious. So it's not like something you do easily besides working. But it's also required to actually master everything you need to know to become a good sustainability professional. Let me move to another question. And do I need to attend any courses or classes in person? So the answer is absolutely no. So it's really a fully 100% online master. Everything will happen online. So we will have the courses that happen online. We will have certain skills crash courses that happen online on topics like effectively like pitching for sustainability, or also AI for sustainability professionals, but also like certain methods crash courses that we have. All of that will happen online. We also will have presentations by practitioners that they will also happen online. We'll have some reflection where you in a small team of 4 reflect on what all of that means for your role as a sustainability professional. All of that happens online. And we think that what we find particularly exciting is that this will be a truly global classroom. So you will be interacting with other students from many other countries, and we think this is part of your experience. So what we think you will get with this master is both intense interactions with faculty members who are leading experts in the field of corporate sustainability, and you will also interact regularly with your fellow students. And you will also just realize how things are done differently in other countries. And I think, particularly in an increasingly polarized world, having direct interactions with people from other countries is something that will be very valuable for you as a sustainability scholar, so that you just know people in other countries and also just learn more about how things are done there. So we just have 1 minute left. Actually, one important point, so applications will be opening within the next 2 weeks, so please stay tuned for that. And let me see whether there's any last question. No, I think also keeping time in mind, let's wrap it up here. So thank you so much for joining today's seminar, and also for raising some really important questions, both in the discussion with Mark, but also concerning the online master. And we will keep you posted on future webinars in which other RSM faculty members will teach in the online master, who teach in the online master will discuss sustainability issues with leading practitioners. So stay tuned and see you then. Bye.